Dear student, loving welcome to English Literature Classroom. This is session 2. Today, we are going to study the fifth short story in Treasure Trove, A Face in the Dark, written by Ruskin Bond. Before we study the story, let us quickly have a glimpse of children's writer Ruskin Bond, who I would like to call as Children's Bond because he has spent his entire life writing for children and entertaining them. Only a writer who has a very deep understanding of children's hearts, their psychology, can write like this. He was born on May 19, 1934. So, just now he has celebrated his 86th birthday. You can view these pics taken during his 86th birthday celebrations. Doesn't he look like a child? That is the reason why Shakespeare has referred to old age as second childhood. All right, about his birthplace in Kasauli, Himachal Pradesh, you can view some beautiful sights of this place. See how beautiful are these places? There is great scope to become a writer when you live in such a beautiful place, right? Let us continue to learn about him. You know that he is an author and a poet. From his childhood itself, he loved reading and writing. So his passion and vocation are same. He is an Indian, studied in Bishop Cotton School, Simla. He has been writing for about 5 decades. Great indeed. See, look at the school he studied. Bishop Cotton School, Simla. Now, in this slide, you can view the awards he received. In 1957, that is when he was just 17 years old, he wrote The Room on the Roof and received John Llewellyn Rhys Memorial Prize. In 1992, he got Sahitya Academy Award for English writing in India. In 1999, he received the great Padma Shri by the Government of India. Now, some of his notable works you can view here. The Blue Umbrella, The Night Train at Deoli, Our Trees Just Still Grow in Dara, Our Trees Still Grow in Dara, then A Flight of Pigeons, and some other books. I recommend all of you to read these books. There are so many other books also. Whichever you find interesting, you can read those books. It will definitely help you. Now, before we go to the story, let us understand, let us know a little bit about the setting of the story. The setting is in Simla. You know that Simla is such a beautiful place. It is the northern Indian state of Himachal Pradesh. It's called as Queen of Hill Stations. A very charming place, and it was the summer capital of British India. And also it is a commercial, cultural, and educational hub. Now, I will tell you the summary of the story. Mr. Oliver, who is the protagonist or the main character of the story, one day he was returning to his school late night. He found a boy sitting on a rock in the pine forest because he was taking the pine forest, which is the shortest route to his school. He asked the boy to look up. He found a boy there and he asked the boy to look up. The boy looked up and he was shocked to see that the boy did not have face, nose, or mouth. Shocked, he ran from there. And on the way to his school, he bumped into a watchman. And the watchman was also faceless like the boy. All right. Now let us read the lesson. You know that from the title itself, A Face in the Dark, you understand that something unnatural. The story is telling about something unnatural, something unusual, something mysterious, strange. Let us read the story. Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher, was returning to his school late one night on the outskirts of the hill station of Simla. From before Kipling's time, the school had been run on English public school lines, and the boys, most of them from wealthy Indian families, wore blazers, caps, and ties. Life magazine, in a feature on India, had once called it the Eden of the East. Mr. Oliver had been teaching in the school for several years. Okay, now you know that Mr. Oliver is the main character of the story. And who is he? He is an Anglo-Indian teacher. And he has been working in this school in Simla for several years. Who is an Anglo-Indian? Anglo-Indian is someone who has a mixed Indian and British ancestry. That is, maybe father is a British and mother an Indian, or vice versa. Also, if someone who is British born and live in India is called as an Anglo-Indian. Now, where was he returning? He was returning to his school when it was dark. It's night time. And the school is situated on the outskirts of the hill station of Simla. Okay, what is the meaning of outskirt? The parts of the city or town that are farthest from the center. So it is away from the center. And Mr. Oliver, and what about the school? Let us know about the school. From before Kipling's time, the school had been run on English public school lines. Now, who is Kipling? Kipling's full name is John Rudyard Kipling. He was a journalist, short story writer, poet, and a novelist whose life extended from 1865 to 1936. And the school is running the lines of public school, English public school. What is public school? In public schools are for boys. And in this particular school, the boys hailed from wealthy Indian families. Only those boys studied here. Most of them were from wealthy Indian families. And what was their uniform? They wore blazers, caps, and ties. During those times, it was very unusual. Only in public schools, the boys used to wear blazers, caps, and ties. And how popular was the school? We can understand about it from the next line, next sentence. That is, the popular magazine Life, the name of the magazine is Life, in a feature, that is an article about India, called this school Eton of the East. So the school is compared to Eton College. And Eton of the East, this is called as Eton of the East. Now, Eton College is a famous independent full boarding school for boys in England. Okay, you should understand about the original Eton. So, okay, the pupils live in the school. This Eton College was founded in 1440 by King Henry VI. And why is it so famous? Because of its rich history. About 20 prime ministers, British prime ministers, were schooled at Eton College, it seems. You can find more details about it. If you're a curious student, you can find more details about it when you browse the net. You know, the school has produced great writers, actors, journalists, etc. So you can understand how great is the school, the quality of education the students receive in the school. Okay, so in such a school, which is called as Eton of the East, Mr. Oliver was working. All right. I hope you understood the first paragraph. Let's go to the next one. Yes. Next paragraph. The Simla Bazaar, with its cinemas and restaurants, was about 3 miles from the school, and Mr. Oliver, a bachelor, usually strolled into the town in the evening, returning after dark, when he would take a shortcut through the pine forest. See? Simla Bazaar is full of cinemas and restaurants, a very vibrant place. And where is it? It is about 3 miles from the school. Okay? And Mr. Oliver is a bachelor. Understand that he is unmarried and he is living alone. Okay? So he is leading a lonely life. So it was his habit to take a stroll. Stroll means a leisurely walk. A leisurely relaxed walk into the town, which is about 3 kilometers from the school in the evenings. So it is obvious that, you know, that Simla Bazaar is a happening place, a vibrant place with cinemas, theaters, restaurants. So you can have a joyful time there. So maybe that is the reason Mr. Oliver used to go there. And always he used to return after the sunset. Now, when he returned, he usually took the shortcut to his school, that is through the pine forest. Okay, so this is a shortcut, and it gives the hint that there is also another road to reach the school, the main road. Okay, you can view some pics there, pictures of Simla Bazaar and the pine forest. Let us go to the next paragraph. Now, when there was a strong wind, the pine trees made sad, eerie sounds that kept most people to the main road. But Mr. Oliver was not a nervous or imaginative man. He carried a torch, and its gleam, the batteries were running down, moved fitfully down the narrow forest path. When its flickering light fell in the figure of a boy who was sitting alone on a rock, Mr. Oliver stopped. Boys were not supposed to be out after dark. Yes. It is mentioned here that usually people did not dare to take this shortcut as why? As when strong wind passed, the pine trees made sad, eerie sounds, that is, mysterious sounds, which would arouse a sense of fear in the people, right? But our hero, Mr. Oliver, was not at all scared of these things. He was not a nervous or imaginative person. All right? Now, the writer here conveys that Mr. Oliver was a reasonable person and never given to unnecessary and unreasonable imagination. A brave person altogether. And what did he carry? He carried a torch in his hand. But as today, what happened? The batteries were running down and it was flickering. That is, the light was slowly fading. Because of that, His movement was fitful, that is, moved fitfully down the narrow forest path. The forest path is narrow, and he could not move steadily through the narrow forest path. It was during this time the flickering torchlight fell on a boy sitting on a rock. To his um, shock, that is, he was really surprised to see a boy at this time. Now, the teacher, Mr. Oliver, felt furious at the boy because the rule of boarding school is boys should not go out after the dark. They should be at the dormitory. Now, let us go to the next paragraph. I hope you understood this. Now, seeing the boy, Mr. Oliver asked, okay, "What are you doing out here, boy?" asked Mr. Oliver sharply, moving closer so that he could recognize the miscreant. But even as he approached the boy, Mr. Oliver sensed that something was wrong. The boy appeared to be crying. His head hung down. He held his face in his hands, and his body shook convulsively. It was a strange, soundless weeping, and Mr. Oliver felt distinctively uneasy. Now, seeing the boy, he wanted to know why the boy is here. So he asked sharply, very curtly, he asked what he was doing there at this odd time. As he could not recognize the boy, he wanted to know who this boy is. So he went closer to see who the miscreant was. Miscreant means someone who does not follow the rule. All right, now Mr. Oliver went closer to the boy, and he could sense that something was wrong. Why he felt so? He saw that the boy was crying. What was the boy's posture? His head hung down, and he held his face in his hands. And not only that, the boy's body was shaking convulsively, that means uncontrollably. How did he weep? Strange and soundless, it was inaudible. And Mr. Oliver felt that there is some kind of difference in the manner the boy cried. Boy cried. Not the usual kind. And he felt disturbed and nervous at this sight. Now, let's move to the next paragraph. "Well, what's the matter?" he asked, his anger giving way to concern. "What are you crying for?" The boy would not answer or look up. His body continued to be racked with silent sobbing. "Come on, boy, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be out here at this hour. Tell me the trouble. Look up." The boy looked up at his teacher. The light from Mr. Oliver's torch fell on the boy's face, if you could call it a face. It had no eyes, no ears, nose, or mouth. It was just a round, smooth head with a school cap on top of it. And that's where the story should end. But for Mr. Oliver, it did not end here. Yes. Now, you know that Mr. Oliver was very disturbed and he was really furious with the boy and all this while. But now, what happened? His anger gave way to concern. Seeing the boy crying, he started feeling some kind of sympathy for the boy. Concern, he was concerned, and he was curious to know why the boy was crying. So he inquired of the boy the reason for his miserable situation. But how much ever he prompted, the boy was not looking up. Instead, Oliver saw that boy's body was suffering from extreme pain due to silent sobbing. He was controlling his emotions. Mr. Oliver encouraged the boy to look up and to in order to open up his problem to him. Finally, the boy looked up, and what did he find? He couldn't find ears, eyes, nose, or mouth. No features of a human, just a round, smooth head and a school cap on it. The writer says that for anyone, the story should end here. You know what would happen if you encounter such a thing, such a mysterious encounter? If you go through such a mysterious encounter, just imagine if I or you were in Mr. Oliver's place, how would we have reacted? Anyway, the story continues for Mr. Oliver, continued for Mr. Oliver. The not nervous or imaginative man, as mentioned by the writer in the third paragraph, was stunned and he was trembling with fear. Yes. Let's see the reaction of Mr. Oliver here in this paragraph. The torch fell from his trembling hand. He turned and scrambled on the path, running blindly through the trees and calling for help. He was still running towards the school buildings when he saw a lantern swinging in the middle of the path. Mr. Oliver stumbled up to the watchman, gasping for breath. "What is it, Sahib?" asked the watchman. "Has there been an accident? Why are you running?" Okay. So now seeing such a sight, he was shocked and he was trembling, and the torch, as a result of it, the torch fell from his hand because his hands were trembling. He turned to the direction of a school building and started running blindly through the trees, pushing his body forward. You know, when you are so much scared, your body becomes frozen, right? It freezes. You will not be able to move. But Mr. Oliver pushed his body forward. He just wanted to run away from such a sight. Maybe he would have thought that it's a ghost. He shouted loudly for help, and suddenly he found a lantern swinging in the middle of the path. And who is carrying this lantern? It was a watchman. You know that he had become breathless, right? He had become breathless due to fear as well as running. The watchman casually asked why Mr. Oliver was running and if any accident had occurred. Now, gasping for breath, he told the watchman about the boy who was faceless. The watchman very casually asked if he didn't have a face. Oliver explained with all fear that the boy did not have eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. And the climax comes here. The watchman raising his lantern. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. I forgot. Yes. Let's read that. I saw something horrible. A boy weeping in the forest, and he had no face. No face, Sahib. No eyes, nose, mouth, nothing. Do you mean it was like this, Sahib? Asked the watchman and raised the lamp to his own face. The watchman had no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. And that is when the wind blew the lamp out. Yes. So, after this conversation, what happened? Climax comes here. Okay. The watchman raised his lantern to his own face, and Mr. Oliver found that the watchman also had no eyes, ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. That most frightening moment, what happened? The wind blew off the lantern light, and total darkness enveloped the area. Ruskin Bond stops the story here, leaving it to the reader to guess what would have happened to Mr. Oliver next. Okay, now it is guessing time for you. You can think Mr. Oliver would have fallen unconscious. You can assume he would have got a heart attack, or he would have lost his mental stability, or anything which your any imagination lets you think of. Yes. All right, children, I hope you all enjoyed this story, A Face in the Dark, written by Ruskin Bond. I know most of you love reading horror stories, right? All right. Yes. Now let us move to the next slide. In this slide, we will discuss the question, how suitable is the title, A Face in the Dark? You know that this is a strange tale, and it revolves around the protagonist, that is the main character, Mr. Oliver. He goes through a strange experience in the pine forest, that is, an encounter with a mysterious, faceless boy. He would not have expected such a thing. He gets overtaken by the emotion of uncontrollable fear and runs away from the frightening scene. But again, he encounters a watchman who also was faceless. We can understand that he could not take more than this. Fear overpowered Mr. Oliver, and the cause of the fear is the faceless boy and the watchman. So, the title is suitable for the story. It is appropriate for the story. I hope you understood, because mostly this kind of questions come for the exam. Now, let's move to the next one. Every lesson is written based on a theme or more. To complete the learning, it is important to understand the theme or themes in the lesson, used in the lesson. So let us discuss the theme of this short story, A Face in the Dark. Unlike many other stories, Face in the Dark, in Face in the Dark, Ruskin Bond uses the theme of supernaturalism. He skillfully uses the scary techniques here. The description of the pine tree forest, the blowing of the wind, and the pine trees making sad, airy, that is mysterious sounds. Mr. Oliver encountering the boy in a strange situation, his silent sobbing, etc. add to the fear element. Now it creates some kind of supernatural atmosphere, right? And it's already mentioned that Mr. Oliver is a bachelor, and so maybe to overcome his loneliness, he used to take a stroll to the Simla market. So this may be due to his loneliness that he would have felt that the boy was a ghost, though he was a man of reasoning ability. As it was totally mysterious, um, to find a faceless boy, right? The writer doesn't tell what happened to Mr. Oliver after his encounter with the watchman. and it ends in an ambiguous manner, leaving the reader to ponder over the question whether there were ghosts or it was just an imagination of Mr. Oliver. So this is about the theme used in the story, that is the supernatural element. I hope you understood it. You can note down the points. Now, before I wind up uh, this lesson, let me express my thanks to this particular video from where I have taken some pictures for my presentation. You can go to this video and watch. Use this link and view it live. Now, attention students, workbook questions. I know you don't have the workbook with you now, but workbook questions and answers are in the description box. You keep it with you. You can go through that, study that. Already we have shared the workbook questions of the cold within and television. I hope you have seen that. You can go through that. Students, so this is the end of this session. Thank you. Study well and don't delay. All right.